The salvage ship Prophet's Edge drifted through the Hallan expanse like a metallic predator searching for prey. Inside the cramped bridge, Captain Vex'ith studied the holographic display with eyes that had seen 3 decades of deep space salvage. Her scaled fingers drummed against the armrest of her captain's chair, a habit from her younger days that she'd never quite shaken. The distress beacon had been easy to find once they'd entered the sector. Pulsed with mechanical regularity, a heartbeat that had continued for 63 years without pause. Vex'ith had learned long ago that old beacons usually meant old disappointments, ships picked clean by other salvagers, or worse, filled with the kind of decay that made even her hardened stomach turn. But this one was different. The signature was human. Zim chittered excitedly from the engineering station, his mandibles clicking in that way that meant he was either nervous or thrilled. Probably both. The Tictal engineer had been with Vex'ith for 15 years, and she could read his moods better than most people could read actual words. Captain, the hull signature matches a human colony ship. Class designation, Frontier 7. That makes it at least 60 years old from their early expansion period. Zim's multiple eyes whirred as he focused on different screens simultaneously. Do you know what human salvage goes for, especially intact? Vex'ith did know. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 70 years ago. Their technology was bizarre, often inefficient by galactic standards, but occasionally brilliant in ways that made no sense to anyone else. Collectors paid premium prices for human artifacts. "Don't count your credits before we dock," Vex'ith said, though she felt the familiar thrill of a potentially profitable find. "Rake, what's our approach look like?" The massive Drenari at the security station grunted. Rake had the appearance of a bear that had been stretched to over 2 meters tall and given the ability to speak, though he rarely used more words than necessary. Clear, no debris field, no other ships in range. That was unusual. A ship dead in space for 6 decades should have attracted attention before now. Vex'ith felt the first whisper of unease. "Dr. Kelly's, you're the human expert. What should we expect?" The tall Verath scholar unfolded himself from the passenger seat where he'd been reviewing data. His gray skin seemed paler than usual in the bridge lights, and his large eyes held that gleam of academic obsession that Vex'ith had learned to be wary of. Kelly's had paid handsomely for passage on this expedition, claiming to be researching human expansion history. Now Vex'ith wondered what he really knew. The New Horizon was a colony ship carrying nearly 3,000 colonists in cryogenic suspension, Kelly said, his voice carrying that lecturing tone academics never quite lost. It disappeared en route to Kepler 442c, simply vanished from all tracking. The humans searched for years but found nothing. It became one of their great mysteries. Until now, Zim added, unable to contain his excitement. Vex'ith studied the ship growing larger on their view screen. The New Horizon was enormous, easily 4 times the size of the Prophet's Edge. Its hull was weathered but intact, marked with the faded lettering and symbols of early human space exploration. It rotated slowly in the void, tumbling gently in the absence of any stabilizing thrust. "Life signs?" Vex'ith asked, though she already knew the answer. "None," Rake confirmed. "No power signatures either. Ship is completely dead." Except it wasn't completely dead, Vex'ith thought. The beacon was still broadcasting, which meant something still had power. She'd been doing this job long enough to know that small inconsistencies often meant big problems. "All right," she said, standing from her chair. "Standard salvage protocol. Zim, you're with me. Rake, secure the ship and monitor our vitals. Dr. Kelly's, you can observe from here until we confirm it's safe." The academic looked like he wanted to protest, but Vex'ith's expression made it clear that arguing would be pointless. She'd lost crew members to unsafe salvage situations before. Never again. The docking process took 40 minutes. The New Horizon's airlock was standard enough that their universal adapter could interface with it, though Zim muttered constantly about human engineering quirks. Vex'ith suited up carefully, checking every seal twice. Rake helped her with the equipment harness, his large hands surprisingly gentle. "Be careful, Captain," the Drenari rumbled. "Something feels wrong about this one." Vex'ith valued Rake's instincts. The Drenari weren't particularly intelligent by galactic standards, but they had survival instincts honed by millions of years of evolution on a death world. If Rake felt uneasy, there was probably a reason. The airlock cycled with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Vex'ith expected to manually override the inner door, but it simply opened, smoothly, as if the ship had been waiting for them. "That's not possible," Zim said, his voice crackling over the comm. "There's no power, the door shouldn't function." But it had. Vex'ith stepped through into the corridor beyond, her helmet light cutting through the darkness, except it wasn't quite dark. A soft bioluminescent glow emanated from the walls themselves, providing just enough light to see by. It was beautiful in an eerie way, like being inside a deep-sea creature. "Are you seeing this, Zim?" The engineer had frozen in the doorway, his scanner held up like a shield. "Captain, I'm not reading any biological material. No bacteria, no algae, nothing that could produce bioluminescence, but the light is definitely there." "Add it to the list of things that don't make sense," Vex'ith said, moving forward. The corridor stretched ahead, curving slightly to follow the ship's superstructure. The walls were lined with doors, each marked with human script. Residential quarters, she guessed. They walked for what felt like a long time, too long. Vex'ith had studied the external scans. This corridor should have been maybe 50 meters long at most. But they'd been walking for at least 3 minutes at a steady pace, and the curve ahead suggested the corridor continued much farther. Zim noticed it at the same moment. "Captain, this is impossible. According to my mapping algorithm, we've walked 237 meters, but the external hull dimensions say this entire section is only 47 meters long." Vex'ith stopped walking. She looked back the way they'd come, then ahead to where the corridor continued. Her mind struggled to reconcile what her eyes saw with what the instruments said. Both couldn't be true, yet both were. "Bigger on the inside," she muttered. It was an old joke from a human entertainment program she'd once seen. She'd thought it was just fiction. They continued forward, more slowly now. Each door they passed was sealed, but Vex'ith had no desire to explore individual quarters yet. She wanted to find the central areas first, the bridge, engineering, anywhere that might have logs or records explaining what had happened. The corridor opened suddenly into a vast space that made Zim emit a high-pitched whine of distress. It was a plaza, inside a spaceship, a genuine town square with pathways, benches, and, impossibly, trees. Real trees with leaves that rustled in a breeze that shouldn't exist. Grass grew in neat patches between the walkways. Above them, a dome showed a sky, complete with a sun that cast warm light across everything. Vex'ith's rational mind tried to categorize what she was seeing. A hydroponics bay, perhaps, an advanced life support system, but she knew better. She'd seen plenty of hydroponic setups, and none of them looked like this. None of them felt like this. "The trees are bearing fruit," Zim said weakly. He'd approached one of them, a species Vex'ith didn't recognize. Small orange spheres hung from its branches. "Fresh fruit. Captain, this ship has been derelict for 63 years. Nothing should be alive." But the fruit wasn't just alive, it looked perfect. Vex'ith reached out and plucked one. It was firm, slightly warm from the artificial sunlight. She squeezed it gently and juice ran down her scaled fingers, fresh, impossibly fresh. "We need to document everything," she said, forcing herself back into professional mode. "Start scanning, full spectrum analysis. I want to know, Captain." Rake's voice over the comm was urgent. "There's a structure in the center of the plaza, looks like a stage or platform." Vex'ith saw it now, half hidden by the trees. A raised platform with what looked like a podium, and next to it a holographic projector, its standby light blinking slowly. She approached carefully, Zim trailing behind her. The projector was human design, elegant in its simplicity. There was a single button marked play in several languages. Vex'ith pressed it. The hologram flickered to life, and a human woman appeared. She was middle-aged, with dark skin and hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her uniform identified her as a ship's captain. But it was her eyes that struck Vex'ith. They were tired but fierce, filled with a determination that transcended species. "To whoever finds this," the hologram began, and Vex'ith was struck by the warmth in the woman's voice. "My name is Captain Rebecca Williams of the colony ship New Horizon. If you're seeing this, you've probably got a lot of questions. We did too, at first." The hologram gestured to the plaza around them. "This is what we built. what we had to build. Our quantum drive failed during our jump to Kepler 442c. We ended up 40 light-years off course, stranded, with no way to call for help and supplies for maybe 3 years if we were lucky. Captain Williams smiled, and there was something almost mischievous in it. The thing about humans is, we're really bad at accepting impossible situations. We had nearly 3,000 people counting on us, families, children. We couldn't just give up and die quietly, so we decided to science the hell out of this. The hologram gestured again, and a schematic appeared next to her, technical diagrams that made Zim lean forward with sudden intense interest. Our chief engineer, Thomas Okafor, figured something out. The ship's computer processes reality through sensors, right? It takes input, interprets it, and acts accordingly. Tom asked a crazy question. What if we could convince the computer that reality was different than it actually was? And what if we gave it enough processing power to maintain that fiction? Vex'ith felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm sunlight. She understood what the captain was implying, but it violated every principle of physics she knew. This Plaza, Captain Williams continued, is our first major success. From the outside, it's 50 meters across. From the inside, well, you can see. We convinced the ship's systems that the space was larger, and once the systems believed it, they made it true. Reality became negotiable. The hologram flickered. I've left detailed logs throughout the ship. Our successes, our failures, everything we learned. You'll find wonders here. You'll also find warnings. Not everything we tried worked the way we hoped, but we survived. That's what matters. The captain's expression softened. We were here. We lived, we laughed, we raised children in this impossible place. And eventually, after 23 years, we were rescued. Every single person made it home. The new horizon gave us that gift. The hologram began to fade. Explore carefully. Respect what we built. And remember, when someone tells you something is impossible, they're really just telling you no one's been desperate enough to try yet. Fair winds, traveler. The projection vanished, leaving Vex'ith and Zim standing in stunned silence. Around them, the impossible plaza continued its gentle life, trees swaying in a breeze that shouldn't exist, under a sun that wasn't real. We need to see everything. Dr. Kelly's voice came over the comm. He'd been listening, of course. This is the most significant discovery in modern physics. We must document every detail. Vex'ith agreed, though for different reasons. She needed to understand what the humans had done here, not just for profit, though the salvage rights would be worth a fortune, but because she'd been in space long enough to develop a healthy fear of things that defied natural law. They explored methodically over the next hours. Zim cataloged impossibility after impossibility, his scientific worldview crumbling with each new discovery. They found a kitchen where food in stasis containers still showed as fresh, the preservation fields operating with impossible efficiency. A medical bay where the lights seemed to actively radiate comfort and healing. Vex'ith felt her chronic back pain ease just from walking through. Each anomaly had a small plaque. Hacked by Thomas O, or fixed by Engineering Team 7, or sometimes just a date, and necessity is the mother of invention. In what had been designated as Engineering Section 7, they found Okafor's workshop. It was a cathedral to human ingenuity and desperation. Workbenches covered with tools, screens showing incomprehensible equations, and most striking, a wall covered in handwritten notes. Actual physical paper, covered in human script. Zim found the engineer's personal logs on a still-functioning tablet. His hands trembled as he activated the playback. Thomas Okafor appeared, younger than Vex'ith expected, with kind eyes and grease-stained hands. Log entry 47. I've figured out how to make the hydroponics bay think it has twice the growing space it actually does. The key is in the quantum layer of the ship's perception algorithms. If you flood the processor with enough contradictory sensor data while simultaneously feeding it a coherent alternative narrative, there's a threshold where the system basically shrugs and accepts your version. The engineer laughed, and it was the slightly unhinged sound of someone who'd been awake too long. We're not breaking physics. We're just convincing the ship that physics was always a little more flexible than it thought, like gaslighting reality. Another log, dated months later, showed Okafor looking more haggard. We've successfully implemented spatial folding in corridors see-through. People are calling them the bigger on the inside halls. It's working better than I hoped. We've effectively tripled our living space without changing the hull. He leaned closer to the camera. But there's a cost. The processing power required is immense. And there's something else. People are starting to report feelings, like the ship is aware of us, responding to us. I think when you hack reality this extensively, reality starts to notice. Vex'ith exchanged glances with Zim. The engineer's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of deep agitation. They ventured deeper into the ship, following the mapped pathways. They discovered sections where gravity was optional, entire chambers where colonists had left notes about swimming through the air. A library where books never decayed, their pages eternally crisp. A nursery with toys that still held the warmth of children's hands, though those children would be in their 60s now. The crown jewel was what the humans had called garden level. From their external scans, it should have been a modest biodome about 50 meters across. They stepped through the entrance and found themselves in what could only be described as a small country. Rolling hills stretched into the distance. Forests of earth trees mixed with alien vegetation. Streams bubbled and flowed, feeding into ponds where fish darted through clear water. The dome above showed a perfect sky with clouds that actually moved. "This is beyond impossible," Zim whispered. This is wrong on every fundamental level." But it wasn't wrong. It was beautiful. Vex'ith walked down a path lined with flowering plants, their scents sweet and organic and utterly real. She found picnic areas, playgrounds for children, benches positioned to offer perfect views of artificial sunsets. Every detail spoke of people who had not just survived but had built a life. Zim discovered the secret buried beneath the central hill, a quantum processor the size of a small building. Its cooling system still hummed, powered by something that their scans couldn't quite identify. The engineer studied the readouts in awed silence. "It's been running continuously for 63 years, he finally said, maintaining every reality hack in the entire ship. The power source is, I don't understand the power source. It seems to be converting matter directly to energy at a rate that should create a black hole, but somehow it's stable." "Another impossibility," Vex'ith said. "No," Zim replied quietly. "This is beyond impossibility. This is humans looking at the fundamental rules of the universe and deciding they were more like suggestions." But as they explored further, they began to find the darker side of the New Horizons miracles. In the residential quarters of Deck 14, they encountered rooms that made Vex'ith's eyes hurt to look at. A bedroom where it was simultaneously day and night, light and shadow occupying the same space. A corridor that led back to its own entrance in a loop that twisted through dimensions Vex'ith didn't have names for. Zim's scanner shrieked warnings. The reality hacks are degrading. Some of them are collapsing into paradoxes. They found a section sealed behind multiple warning signs written in a dozen languages. The universal message was clear: danger, do not enter, quarantine. Rake had joined them by now, having left the Prophet's Edge on remote monitoring. The big Drenari studied the seals and grunted. "Can open it. Should we?" Vex'ith considered. Every instinct screamed that some doors should stay closed, but they needed to understand. "Open it, carefully." The seals broke with a hiss of escaping air that smelled like ozone and something sweet and wrong. Beyond was a chamber that made all of them take an involuntary step backward. The room existed in a state that Vex'ith's mind couldn't properly process. It was simultaneously larger and smaller than its frame. Objects inside moved when they weren't being observed, frozen when watched directly. Time felt wrong, their chronometers spun wildly, each showing different readings. On the far wall, written in shaky human script, "Failed Experiment 23. Do not attempt to replicate. Some doors shouldn't be opened." They sealed it again quickly, all of them shaken. Dr. Kelly's, watching through their helmet cameras, was nearly incoherent with fascination and horror. It was in the medical bay that they found Dr. Yuki Tanaka's logs. The medical officer had documented everything with scientific precision, including the costs of the reality hacking. Month 7, the recorded doctor said, looking exhausted. We've had 17 cases of what I'm calling perception dysphoria. Crew members who have spent too much time in the modified sections report seeing things that shouldn't exist, or not seeing things that should. The line between what's real and what we've convinced the ship is real is blurring. Another log later. Tom and his team have to enter deep meditative states to initialize the major hacks. They're essentially willing reality to change, then using the ship's systems to stabilize it. But it's taking a toll. 2 of his engineers collapsed today. One keeps insisting she can see through walls now. The concerning part is, sometimes she actually can. The doctor leaned closer to the camera. We're learning that consensus reality matters. If enough people believe something strongly enough, it starts to become true on this ship. We've had to establish strict mental discipline protocols. No panic, no mass hysteria, or we risk making our fears manifest. But the final logs brought relief. Month 61. We detected a human exploration vessel. We're going to make it. Everyone is going to make it. They reached the bridge finally, the nerve center of the new horizon. It was both exactly what Vex'ith expected and completely surreal. The command chairs and control stations looked normal, but the main view screen showed a vista that shifted subtly, sometimes showing the real space outside, sometimes showing an idealized version of what the crew wanted to see. Captain Williams's final logs were here, of course. Vex'ith played them chronologically, watching 23 years of struggle and triumph compress into hours. The captain aged visibly through the recordings, but she never lost that fierce determination in her eyes. She documented births and deaths, celebrations and crises, the formation of a genuine society inside this pocket reality they'd carved from desperation. The final log showed Captain Williams older, gray-haired, but smiling genuinely for the first time. Final log entry. We did it. Every single person is in an escape pod. The rescue ship arrived 3 days ago. They couldn't believe we'd survived. They especially couldn't believe what we'd done to survive. She looked around the bridge with obvious affection. The new horizon will be left behind. She's too modified to move safely. Too many of the hacks are integrated into her core systems. But she saved us. This ship became more than metal and circuits. We made her into something impossible, something wonderful. Captain Williams stood, placed her hand on the command chair. To whoever finds this, we were here, we survived. We raised families and built a life in a place that shouldn't exist. We did it by refusing to accept that reality was fixed. Her smile turned almost fierce. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's that when the universe says impossible, we say, watch me. The galaxy fears human ambition, human aggression. But this is what they should really fear or admire. We don't conquer reality. We befriend it, convince it, hack it until it agrees with us. The recording ended. Vex'ith stood in the silent bridge, processing everything they'd discovered. We need to talk, she said, gathering her crew. They met in the impossible Plaza under the artificial sun. Dr. Kelly's had finally been allowed aboard and was practically vibrating with excitement. Rake stood quietly, his massive form somehow reassuring. Zim was running calculations on his tablet, muttering constantly. This ship is worth more than anything we've ever found, Vex'ith began. The technology alone could revolutionize galactic civilization. The hull, the systems, the quantum processor, we could sell all of it for enough credits to buy our own planet. She paused, looking at each of them. Dr. Kelly's wants to bring in research teams, dismantle everything, figure out how it works. The academic nodded eagerly. Think of what we could learn, reality manipulation. The applications are limitless. The dangers are also limitless, Zim interjected. Captain, I've been reviewing the logs. Several of their experiments created permanent spatial anomalies. They came close to tearing holes in spacetime multiple times. This technology is incredibly dangerous. Dangerous things can be studied safely with proper precautions, Dr. Kelly's argued. Rake spoke up, his deep voice cutting through the debate. What would the humans want? They all turned to look at him. The Drenari rarely offered opinions, so when he did, people listened. Captain Williams said they lived here, raised children here. This wasn't just a ship to them, it was home. Vex'ith felt something settle in her chest. She'd been wrestling with the decision, but Rake had crystallized it perfectly. "We're not dismantling the New Horizon," she said firmly. "We'll report the location to human authorities. We'll provide copies of all the logs we've accessed, but the ship itself stays intact." Dr. Kelly's erupted in protests, but Vex'ith cut him off with a gesture. "This is a monument to human survival. It deserves to remain that way. Some things are more valuable than money, Doctor. This is one of them." The academic sputtered, but Vex'ith's word was final. As they prepared to leave, gathering their documented scans and recordings, something extraordinary happened. The ship's systems, dormant except for the minimal functions maintaining the reality hacks, suddenly blazed to full life. Lights brightened throughout the vessel. The artificial sun in the plaza grew warmer, more vibrant. The gardens bloomed with new growth as if responding to their decision. Throughout the ship, speakers crackled to life with Captain Williams's voice, a recording they hadn't found, one that had been waiting. "If you're hearing this, you've chosen to preserve our story rather than profit from it. Thank you. Thank you for understanding what we built here. The New Horizon has one last gift." Data began streaming to the Prophet's Edge's computer. Zim's tablet lit up with incoming files. Technical schematics, engineering innovations, improved designs for life support systems, more efficient recycling protocols, engine modifications that could improve fuel efficiency by 40%. "These are the safe innovations," Captain Williams's voice continued. "The practical improvements that came from necessity. Not the reality-bending technology, that's too dangerous to spread carelessly. But these gifts might help others survive their own impossible situations." The data transfer completed. The lights slowly dimmed back to their previous levels, the gardens returned to their gentle growth. The ship settled back into its dreamlike state. Vex'ith and her crew stood in awed silence. Around them, the New Horizon seemed to breathe, alive in ways that transcended normal definitions. "She knew," Zim whispered. "Somehow they programmed her to know what choice we'd make." "Or," Rake rumbled thoughtfully, "she really is aware. Like Okafor worried, they hacked reality so much that the ship woke up." They departed carefully, sealing the airlock behind them. As the Prophet's Edge undocked, Vex'ith watched the New Horizon through the viewscreen. The colony ship continued its slow tumble through space, looking exactly as it had when they'd arrived, weathered, ancient, impossible. 3 months later, Vex'ith sat in her quarters reviewing news feeds. The human government had sent ships to the New Horizon. They were converting it into a museum, the ship of impossibilities. The original survivors, now elderly but still vibrant, were being interviewed across human space, telling their stories. Dr. Kelly's had published papers on the New Horizon phenomenon, becoming one of the most celebrated researchers in the galaxy. He'd sent Vex'ith a terse message thanking her for the discovery, though he still clearly resented not getting to dismantle everything. Zim had installed several of the innovations from Captain Williams's gift into the Prophet's Edge. Their ship now ran 40% more efficiently, recycled water at nearly perfect efficiency, and had life support systems that could maintain optimal conditions with a fraction of the usual power. The engineer had also, somewhat adorably, started a small garden pod in his quarters. Rake had requested his own garden space and was now successfully growing earth tomatoes, of all things. He tended them with surprising gentleness, often talking to the plants the way the New Horizons gardens seemed to respond to presents. As for Vex'ith herself, she'd received an official communication from the human government. A formal thank you, a modest financial reward that showed they understood salvage rights even if they kept the ship itself, and something more valuable, an invitation. "Captain Vex'ith," the message read, "you understood what the New Horizon meant. You saw beyond profit to the real value of what humanity can create when pushed to our limits. That kind of perspective is rare. Human colonies are always in need of experienced salvage crews, especially those who appreciate that some finds are worth more intact than dismantled. Consider this an open invitation to work in human space. We take care of those who take care of us. You're honorary human in our books." Vex'ith read the message 3 times, feeling something warm in her chest. In 30 years of salvage work, she'd never received an invitation like this. Most species barely tolerated salvagers, necessary scavengers at best. She called her crew to the bridge. Zim scurried in with his tablet, already reviewing potential jobs. Rake lumbered in carrying a ripe tomato, which he offered to Vex'ith with a pleased grunt. "I've been thinking," Vex'ith said, accepting the tomato and taking a bite. It was surprisingly good. "We've spent our careers picking over the dead remains of ships. What if we worked with people instead?" She showed them the invitation. Zim's mandibles clicked excitedly. Rake simply nodded as if he'd expected this. "Human space," Zim said thoughtfully. "They're chaotic, illogical, and apparently capable of hacking reality when sufficiently motivated. It'll be dangerous." "Probably," Vex'ith agreed. "They also pay well, respect salvage rights, and make excellent food," the engineer added, eyeing Rake's tomato garden enthusiastically. "I vote yes." "Yes," Rake rumbled simply. Vex'ith smiled, feeling the rightness of the decision. She'd spent 3 decades scavenging the galaxy's leftovers. Maybe it was time to see what humanity was building instead of just finding what they'd left behind. She drafted a response accepting the invitation, then set course for the nearest human colony. As the Prophet's Edge jumped to FTL, Vex'ith thought about Captain Williams and the New Horizon, about people who looked at impossible odds and decided to try anyway, about the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that seemed built into human DNA. The galaxy worried about human weapons, human expansion, human ambition. But Vex'ith had seen the real truth on that impossible ship. Humans didn't just survive, they thrived. They turned derelict ships into gardens, convinced reality to be more flexible, and built communities in places that shouldn't exist. That was the real reason humanity would change the galaxy. Not through conquest or force, but through sheer, stubborn, creative refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. And now Vex'ith and her crew were going to see what other impossible things humans were creating out there among the stars. She smiled, took another bite of Rake's impossibly good tomato, and guided her ship toward humanity's frontier. Whatever they found there, she was certain of one thing: it would never be boring.